That night, under a sky black as ink, a sleeping coastline suddenly woke up to a deep roar from the bowels of the earth. The surface of the sea shivered, waves lost their rhythm, and people standing on the shore could only watch as the horizon lit up blood red, as if someone had just torn a hole in the curtain of night, and a giant column of fire shot straight into the sky. In a few short moments, the world around them looked like the end of days and the most breathtaking scene they had ever witnessed. No one thought about taking selfies or recording videos because the only clear feeling in that moment was this: if Earth truly decided to get angry, humanity would be nothing more than a thin layer of dust on its surface. We usually think of volcanoes as machines of destruction. Lava, ash, toxic gases, rivers of molten rock devouring everything in their path, explosions that can wipe out towns, make an entire island disappear from the map. In popular imagination, volcanoes are always nightmares, the place where gods punish, where monsters dwell, where heroes enter and rarely return. And yet the paradox is this: without these engines of destruction, Earth might never have had continents as we know them, an atmosphere we can breathe, green forests, fertile plains, or even life itself in the form we recognize. The question sounds almost backward. How can something capable of wiping out life also be the very thing that creates and nourishes it? How can a single natural phenomenon play both the executioner and the midwife of an entire planetary ecosystem? And if we look through the layers of ash and lava, past the catastrophic eruptions, can we see a deeper logic, a cycle in which destruction and rebirth are simply two faces of the same turning gear? To understand why volcanoes are both destroyers and creators of life, we have to turn back the clock to a time when Earth was far from gentle like it is today. When this planet first formed, it wasn't a blue marble with fluffy white clouds like in satellite photos. It was a hellish world, a molten surface, constant meteor impacts, an atmosphere thick with toxic gases, a sky glowing red with dust and heat. There were no forests, no blue oceans, no birds singing. There was only magma, hot rock, and pillars of fire erupting endlessly from the planet's interior. In that hellish picture, volcanoes weren't rare disasters, they were the normal breathing rhythm of a young planet shaping itself. Each eruption carried material from deep underground to the surface, where it cooled and gradually became the foundation of future continents. Old pieces of crust sank, melted, then returned as new lava. Over hundreds of millions of years, that repeated process built the surface we're standing on now. Every mountain range, every plateau, every island carries the fingerprints of ancient magma. But volcanoes didn't just build land, they also helped build the sky. Many scientists believe a significant portion of Earth's atmosphere and water came from volcanic activity in those early ages. When Earth was young, countless eruptions released water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur, and other gases into the space around the planet. Water vapor condensed into clouds, rain fell, the first storms crashed onto a cooling surface, pulling into puddles, then lakes, then primitive seas. In a sense, right from the beginning, volcanoes signed their name on the contract that created both land and oceans. If we could zoom out on Earth's geologic timeline and watch it in time-lapse, we would see a repeating rhythm, the crust bending and cracking, volcanoes erupting, lava spreading, cooling, being broken down by wind and rain into fragments. Those fragments forming soils, and from those soils, plants sprouting, animals arriving, building whole living worlds, only for another eruption, someday, to erase everything and restart the cycle. Destruction here is not a final event, it is a violent beginning for a new round of regeneration. Of course, from a human perspective, these cycles are anything but poetic. An eruption can kill tens of thousands of people, bury entire cities under ash, transform a region's landscape in just a few hours. Names like Pompeii, Krakatoa, Tambora, Pinatubo have become part of our shared memory of the days when Earth reminded us who really holds the power. A volcano doesn't just spew lava, it throws ash high into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight, cooling the planet, ruining harvests, triggering famine, and spreading disease. On a larger scale, volcanoes are suspected of having contributed to several mass extinction events in Earth's history. Imagine you are a living creature in a fertile river plain, surrounded by dense forests, abundant streams, and what feels like stability. Then one day the horizon glows crimson, and the ground shudders as if a giant beast is crawling beneath your feet. Ash falls so thick that noon turns to night. The air stings your lungs, and heat rises like a furnace. You run, but where do you run when the sky itself seems to be collapsing? In a matter of days or weeks, the entire ecosystem around you is gone. From the viewpoint of life in that moment, a volcano has only one name: annihilation. Yet if we fast forward the timeline by decades or centuries, the story changes color. The ash layer that killed the forest, once cooled and broken down by rain and wind, becomes a massive blanket of mineral fertilizer. Weathered basalt releases iron, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, and countless trace elements, turning the ground into an incredibly fertile new soil. Seeds carried by wind, birds, and water find tiny cracks in the black surface, take root, and grow. Within a few decades, the first green shoots poke through the gray ash, and then a young forest emerges. After a few centuries, no one would guess this was once a battlefield of fire. Volcanic islands in the middle of the ocean are the clearest proof of this power of rebirth. At the beginning, they're nothing but bare, hot rock protruding from the sea, with no plants, no animals, only black stone hammered by endless waves. But over time, sea wines bring seeds, birds stop to rest, their droppings sow nutrients and life. The lava rock weathers into fine soil, grasses appear, then shrubs, then trees. Eventually, the barren island becomes a lush forest, full of birds, insects, small mammals, flowers, and the sounds of a brand new ecosystem. It all started with a crack on the ocean floor and the volcanic eruption. On an even larger scale, volcanoes participate in cycles that keep the planet from dying. One of the most important is the carbon cycle. The carbon dioxide that volcanoes release might worry us today because of climate change, but over hundreds of millions of years, it has acted like a blanket keeping Earth warm. Without a steady supply of CO from deep inside, our planet could have gradually lost its atmosphere and become as cold and dry as Mars. On the other hand, if there were only CO without processes that absorb it like weathering of volcanic rocks, photosynthesis in plants, and ocean absorption, Earth could have become so hot that it was uninhabitable. In that balancing act, volcanoes are both suppliers and key players in reshaping the surface so carbon can be drawn from the atmosphere into rocks, then released again millions of years later. When fresh lava cools, it reacts with CO and water, locking greenhouse gas into solid minerals. After a long time, these crustal plates are pushed down, melted, and volcanoes bring that carbon back into the sky. Destruction and rebirth here are not just about forests and cities, they are about the climate itself. There's another fascinating question. Did life's very first spark have anything to do with volcanoes? No one knows for sure, but one strong hypothesis is that life may have begun around hydrothermal vents, underwater volcanoes that don't spew fire but superheated, mineral-rich water. Down there, chemical energy, steep temperature gradients, mineral surfaces, and simple molecules may have come together in complex reactions, gradually leading to the first self-replicating molecules. In other words, hidden volcanic vents on the dark ocean floor might have been the original cradle of life. Even if that hypothesis is not yet fully proven, it reveals something important: environments that we consider extremely hostile, super hot, acidic, rich in sulfur, completely dark, can be places where life not only survives but flourishes. Extremophile microbes cling to the walls of vents, bathing in water hundreds of degrees hot, in total darkness, living off chemical energy instead of sunlight. This reminds us that destruction is a very relative concept. For us, volcanoes are horror. For some other forms of life, they are opportunity. From a human societal perspective, volcanoes play more roles than we often realize. Volcanic soils are incredibly fertile, creating rich agricultural zones that feed millions of people. It's no coincidence that many of the world's major volcanoes are surrounded by prosperous farming regions. People know it's dangerous, but they stay anyway because each abundant harvest is a reminder that deadly ash has been transformed into grain and food. In the decision to remain there lies a gamble, accepting the risk of destruction in exchange for daily sustenance. For civilizations, volcanoes are both threat and architect. A major eruption can change history in ways that are easy to miss. In a year when volcanoes trigger poor harvests over large areas, uprisings, migrations, and wars may erupt. Empires that seem stable can crack. Layers of ash and ice cores and sediments tell us about times when Earth sneezed and set off chains of domino effects in human society. Volcanoes don't only destroy villages, they can also destabilize political orders. So why, despite all this danger, are volcanoes still essential to a living planet? Because a perfectly quiet world with no volcanoes, no plate tectonics may sound safe, but it would be like a machine that has been switched off. There would be no way to recycle material, no internal energy feeding the surface, no long-term climate regulation. Life, if it existed at all, would struggle to diversify in such a static, impoverished environment. Earth is lucky in that it is just violent enough to run all the cycles life needs, but not so violent that life is completely wiped out. From that angle, volcanoes are like the planet's heart. Each eruption is a powerful heartbeat, sometimes a painful spasm, but if the heart stopped, everything else would slowly die. The terrifying explosions we witness are only the visible tip of the iceberg. Beneath them, over hundreds of millions of years, is a constant circulation and renewal of Earth's crust, atmosphere, and oceans, the very foundations life stands on. Of course, that doesn't mean we should romanticize every eruption. For communities living near volcanoes, every tremor means facing a practical question: stay on this fertile land or leave to save our lives. For scientists, every massive sleeping volcano is a question mark. When will it wake? And when it does, will it destroy a small area or trigger a global event? Our dependence on land, climate, and water means that every cough of the planet can turn into a disaster if we are not prepared. But perhaps the most important lesson volcanoes teach us is to look at destruction differently. In nature, absolute destruction is rare. What is erased in one form tends to reappear in another. An old forest burns down, but the ash feeds a new forest. An ancient continent is crushed, but its fragments become the base for new mountains. Whenever a volcano erupts, a familiar world may vanish, but the atoms and elements that made that world are still there, waiting to be rearranged. In Earth's long story, volcanoes are characters with two faces. One face is merciless, capable of erasing a city in minutes, wiping out humanity's greatest structures like a line drawn on the sand. The other face is a silent builder, lifting new material to the surface, enriching soils, tuning the climate, shaping topography, and perhaps even lighting the first spark of life. Volcanoes are not good or evil. They simply play their role in a system far larger than any story we tell. When you look at a quiet volcano covered in vegetation, it's hard to imagine the lava flows that once rushed down its slopes or the ash clouds that blocked out the sun. But that calm beauty is built on past eruptions. Every grain of soil, every blade of grass, every drop of water on its flanks carries the memory of fire. And if one day it wakes again, we will witness another round of destruction, followed once more by new green life sprouting in the ash. In the end, the question, why do volcanoes destroy and regenerate life, is just another way of asking, why is Earth alive at all? A living planet is never a still planet. It must always move, change, break itself apart, and put itself back together. Volcanoes are how Earth tells us it is still alive, that beneath this thin, fragile crust lies a giant engine still running. The real question is how we, tiny creatures on its surface, learn to live with those heartbeats so we are not crushed by the gears when they turn. But also never forget that those same gears created the ground we call home.